All right, so we're back with another update, and I have to say this one's going to be a little bit lighter, because this last week has been a little bit crazy for me in multiple directions, as you may know. I know I'm doing the as you know dialogue. Terrible, Daniel. But anyway, as you may know, this is called exposition. As you may know, AutoCrit just launched the Novel 90 Writing Challenge. And of course, we had all of that hoopla about that. We had a lot of new people come in, and I was assisting with that. And there was just a lot going on with that and getting that over the hump and launched. And I'm so excited to be meeting all of you. And we have so many people on the planner team. Yay, go planners! Totally gonna win this. And there's that. But addition to that, maybe even more important, I got really super sick. Super sick. It wasn't like a disease, I don't think. I think it was just some sort of case of food poisoning or something. Because I was just sick to my stomach. I couldn't really eat anything. I was actually really worried. Well, not really worried, but I was fairly worried that on Sunday night when I was doing my workshops, if I was going to get through them without having to excuse myself. But everything was fine. I had my wits about me mostly. But because of that, it did sort of slow me down. However, I can say I left off last week on kind of a sort of note, right? Because the second book was not so great. I have read the third book, and it is so much better. The third book, in many ways, is probably the best book. So I'm very, very happy about that because I went into the second book thinking it was better than the first one, and then I didn't really think so. But the third book is pretty great, so I'm okay with that. There are things that I might want to tweak and whatnot and polish, but it's not a major story development issue. It's more of a finesse of the thing issue. Now, there was a story thing that I was noticing that was happening in both the second book and the third book, and something I wanted to address. So I think it was because I was kind of under the influence of like the Hunger Games and certain things at the time where you have this very reactionary protagonist because you have a world that's kind of forcing them into things. And that's not necessarily a problem because in the young adult world you often do feel like that. But I definitely want to, in the fourth book, empower my protagonist to be a little bit more actively involved in whatever the plot is, rather than it being the first one was more of that. The first book is I want to find out the answer to something. Nobody's telling me the answer. I'm gonna have to find it for myself. I'm gonna have to make my own way, kind of thing, with the help of others. Okay. And then the second one was there's a mystery that I'm kind of again they're interested in solving, but it was more of they're getting kind of boxed in to decisions and things like that. And then the third one is much more somebody else is being tasked to do something, but I'm going to go along for the ride. Now, I think it makes perfect sense for that to be the case. I mean, there is the danger when you have a young adult series is like, why are the young adults being drafted to do all these crazy bananas dangerous things, right? Um, and so you either have to make them be rebellious, which was kind of the first one, or rebellious in the third one to accompany the person who's going through all the dangerous stuff, right? Um, yeah, more or less rebellious. But anyway, so that means in the fourth book, though, which is the last book, I really do want to see the protagonists come into their own. I really want to see them make some big decisions and prove some uh, authority figures ultimately wrong. That's kind of a young adult thing, but in an appropriate sort of way. What value do they have? Where can they push back and actually accomplish things and move civilization forward? And perhaps where they're going to try too hard and yeah, find out they're really not so great. So yeah, so anyway, so that's where I'm starting. I figured what I would do from here is pivot towards the fourth book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain my processes for outlining and brainstorming and all of that. You'll see more of this when I actually dive into things because I'm hoping by our check-in day, we have a planner check-in day coming in in a little while here. Check the calendar on AutoCrit to find out about the player check-in day for Novel Night participants. But for there, I'll hopefully have more to actually literally show you. I hope all of you planners will have something to show me because I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I would love to see where your outlines are. But I figured I would share my process and considered exactly step by step how I do it. So I'm still sort of forming it in my head as I go along here. So you'll have to kind of bear with me here. There might be some like quick edits and things as I actually gather my thoughts. So um, anyway, so the first thing that I usually come up with a story is sort of my big what if scenario. Like, what is my hook? What am I super excited about? So, in case of a fourth book in a series, obviously I have my world, so that sometimes the what if is the world, what if this was a world? That's how this book series actually started. My concept was, well, what if the Fantastic Four was kind of true and that you could shoot people with radiation, but they would end up with really weird different results? Because I always thought it was odd that how come, excuse me, the four people ended up with such different results. And so then I was like, well, maybe it's something with genetics. And then I tried to trim it down to not quite as outlandish of powers as the Fantastic Four, but more things that are found generally in nature. And so it's kind of like, well, we're kind of unlocking vestigial or old DNA information or something. I mean, it is very pseudosciencey. This is not sci-fi really. This is speculative uh young adult fantasy sort of feeling, right? It's not meant to be taken that seriously. However, I do try to take the kind of the sociopolitics of it fairly seriously. But anyway, so so that was my what if idea for the series. So in the second book, the what if was um specifically regarding the mystery, and then the third one, it was involved with uh, a search and find sort of mystery. So what I'm gonna have to do for the fourth book is figure out, okay, what is like my central thing that I want to discuss. Now I know the ultimate ending because this whole thing is building up to a kind of a big showdown, as you might expect, between different factions. There are some people that really hate this technology. There are some people who are using this technology, and then even within the people using the technology, there are people that don't like some of the class warfare that's going on, and there's even some people that are of a different camp that are against it, but for even different reasons. So anyway, there's like four different factions going on. So ultimately, my goal isn't to just settle the question. I'm not planning on going scorched earth and it's like bing, it's all fixed. It's not that kind of thing. But I also don't want it to be like, okay, and what's the satisfactory conclusion? So I do want certain things to come to a head for each of these four factions. I have revealed more or less towards the end of the third book, but I haven't quite spelled it out. But in the fourth book, I want it to get to the most fever pitch kind of, if you want to talk about kind of like a Cold War, like a Cuban Missile Crisis sort of situation, I want it to come to that. And then I kind of want it to be like the Cold War is over, right? It doesn't mean that there isn't still political unrest between these two camps, but I want it to reach some sort of conclusion. So, that being said, the big story question is going to be, well, how could my protagonist play a major role in this? And I have some ideas based on that, based on other things that I've set up in the third book, because there are other priors about this world. See, it's kind of hard to describe a lot of this without like spoiling the whole series or whatever. But I'm just trying to give you a high level of what's going on here. So I'm thinking of world. I guess the point is I'm thinking of world related what if questions, right? That's where I'm starting because I have this kind of epic scope. All right, so then the next thing I would ask myself is, what are the character outcomes that I'm looking for? What kind of what is what is the path for everybody? So I have about 5 or 6 major characters that are recurring. I have some others that have come and gone. So maybe about 8 altogether. I know I have my 8 archetypes I like to track. But yeah, I want to give each of them a good conclusion. So what I will do is I will think of, all right, so I have my different factions and I want to figure out, okay, where do I want them to more or less line up? And then I have my characters, and then I'm going to think more or less where I want to line up. Now you might be like, this is very interesting. You're starting at the ending versus the beginning. That's true. That wouldn't necessarily always be my process. Uh, I am pretty focused on that. Now, what that isn't telling me exactly is what the plot of the story is. Now, I did sort of tie my hands at the end of the third book because there's a cliffhanger in that the protagonist is in a situation that needs to be resolved. Um, but you could go a lot of different directions with it, or I could go a lot of different directions with it, right? So, thinking of the plots, again, I'm going to just think of this in a more abstract sort of way. The first one was more or less kind of a heist sort of story. It was a ragtag band trying to sneak around to get things done. Second one was more of a murder mystery story. Again, that's the one I don't like so much. I want to convert that into more of a murder thriller, or a thriller story versus a murder mystery story. The third one is a search and kind of a search and find. It's similar heisty sort of thing to the first one, but it's less intrigue about what's going on. I guess what I'm trying to get at is how have my plots shifted? They're pretty similar. So they're all kind of in that mystery sort of category in a way. There's like something they need to figure out. They're kind of sneaking around figuring things out to a certain extent. So do I want more of the same, or is now the time to totally change things up? Now, one thing I don't want to do is I don't want this to become like Lord of the Rings or Divergent or something, or Hunger Games. Like, I'm not trying to make this into a full-on revolution. There is political unrest, but I actually want this to be resolved more through wits and cunning than through just crazy amounts of like battles or things like that. I feel like that would just, if I started to go that direction, I really would need to do more books, because if this is like the first battle of revolution, I wouldn't be able to start and end a revolution in a single book. That would be silly. And I also wasn't really intending to do that. This is one of those where people are not liking each other, but I don't think they're really picking up weapons and fighting each other exactly. So yeah, so the important thing is to kind of think of those pinnacle moments, the pinnacle moments of where all those different factions need to end up. And so I want to end there. Now, usually I wouldn't want to end it, but because this is the final book of a 4-book series, it's kind of a necessity. So the next thing I would do is I would look at my characters, because now that I have like my overall scenario as to what I think should happen kind of in the world, now I'm going to ask, how are the characters interacting with the world? How are the characters influencing those different actions in the world, et cetera, et cetera. And so obviously I have my protagonist, and I have to think of where do I want my protagonist to land. I want them to have a major impact in this story. I want them to be a driving force. I already mentioned earlier that I was concerned that the main character wasn't, doing as much. Or having as much involvement. At least I think I said that, or anyway, I was thinking it. My character didn't have as much involvement in the original stories, like in terms of driving the story forward. In the second and the third one, they're kind of more along for the ride. And so in the fourth one, I really want to make sure they are front and center and involved in that. Now, I have a question as to if I kill off anybody. In the third book, I had a pretty major death. And so, do I have more of that? I could. There is a major character that I have considered dying. having killed off. I don't. I get mixed about that because sometimes I think it's like dying is easy, living is harder, right? Sometimes it's better to have sad things happen and they have to live with the consequences, and it's almost more tragic than if they just die. I don't know. That's how I feel sometimes, and I think that sometimes authors just jump to death. So I don't know if I will have another super major characters die. I'll probably have somebody die, but not a so somebody definitely is going to die. But major character I don't know. Um, but the nice thing is because the third book had a major character die, now I can tease that a major character is dying in this one, and even if I don't kill them off, you're going to be on edge because you're going to be like, "Oh, he would do it. He did it last time, right?" And I don't know, maybe I will do it. So I have, those factions where they're going to end up the world building, and then I have the characters. Now, there are going to be some new characters introduced, of course, because of the scenario that I left my main character off at the end of the third book. They're in a new location, they have to meet some new people. There's a lot of reasons why there's going to be new characters from the story to work. But I also need to make sure they are informing the story, the actual plot. They're not just there along for the ride to be set dressing or people to interact with, right? What do they do? So I need to really look at my characters and figure out where are they slotting in my archetype. I have my 8 archetypes I like to track for stories. Where do they fall for these plot archetypes? And so that way they all will earn their spot on the page and they'll be distinct enough from one another. But this will be a pretty big cast book because I'm going to bring back a lot of other people. Curtain calls. There are some people that were alluded to at the beginning that are going to be discovered again, and things like that. There won't be a crazy amount of newness in terms of the world building. Again, this is time to start buttoning things up. But the first part of it is going to have exploring that new location that I said I left the character off at the end of the third book. All right. So that being said, all right. So the next step I would do is I need to kind of think of my linchpin moments, my first act to second act, my second act twist, and my third act push. I know what my third act push is. I'm pretty sure I've got it already in my head. That really comes from that faction discussion. First act push, I also know because it's a plot twist that I have been waiting on since the beginning of my book series. So I got that too. So the second one is where I think that the characters are going to inform me a little bit. And to be honest, I won't know that until I start brainstorming the beats themselves. So I have those kind of linchpin moments and I think about the pinnacle moment, the all the stuff I have on the page to offer, all of those back notes. What is the most interesting thing that I can do? I do that and I think about that, and then I kind of build around it. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to go through beat by beat and think of every individual moment that interlinks all of these. So you can see I guess it makes sense, right? You start at the end, then I'm like thinking of the linchpin moments, the big moments, and then I'm going to link all of them together. But it's not going to be quite as beautiful as that. That's me kind of explaining how my brain thinks, which is really like I kind of do everything everywhere all at once sort of thing, and I think very high level and down and back and forth, and I'm constantly adjusting and tinkering and tinkering and tinkering. But what I finally end up with is those archetypical characters, right? What do they want? What are they doing? What's their role in the story? All those beasts, and that's pretty much where I tend to leave off my outline. Now, there are uh, like, how deep do I go in the beats might be a question. Some people write much longer outlines than me. I feel like I can fly at a pretty high level because it's just the way my brain works. That I can be like, they break into the bank, and I'm like, and I have a lot of idea of what is baked into that. I don't have to like cement it all right at that moment. But sometimes when it's a more complicated thing, I will do more because I need to say this person will do this person will do that. You need to give them all roles. Who's in the scene? What are they all doing in the scene and things like that. I try to do that to avoid having kind of dead weight characters that show up, don't do anything, or forget about characters and end up with interesting moments. One thing I will say is I still give myself a lot of flexibility to change my mind. So this may sound like I'm painting myself in a corner. I'm not. More than likely, the book will be similar to this outline. but it'll not be an exact carbon copy of it. As when you get into the actual execution, characters will tend to give you ideas because just the organic way that happens, you start to say, you know what, this character would be more capable of doing something like this. At least that's the way I work. I know some people that's not how it is, but for me, yeah, that's how it is. And sometimes too, I'll be like, oh, you know what? This isn't that tense of a scene. If this character made this really stupid mistake, or if this character was in the scene and they're not in the scene, it would make it a lot more interesting. And so I'll make adjustments like that. In terms of like huge changes, probably not. I hope to have it pretty well buttoned up because if I don't know huge things, then that means I don't really know what I'm writing. And if I'm just kind of floundering around trying to find my way, it's probably going to be really super messy. So I actually do think I planned the second book a lot less than the third book, and I think it shows. Anyway, I will be at the planner check-in event for all of you who are in Nival 90, and I will be sharing all of my outlines there. Of course, I'm going to keep up this series, and I'll show you how I built it out in the writer's desk in the next episode. So thank you for joining me. I know this one was a little bit lighter on over-the-shoulder content. This was more like me discussing brain stuff. But I hope you found it influential in thinking of ways that you can outline and you can brainstorm your story, even if you aren't a planner. If you aren't a planner, if you're a plantser or a pantser, well, we're going to have check-ins for you as well with those coaches, and you'll find all of that inside AutoCrit. I do recommend going there. I'm not going to give you dates because I want you to go there. I want you to find out. Look at that calendar on the right-hand side. RSVP for these events. There's a lot of great things to join us for. Even if you're an AutoCrit Pro member, you can join us for the Novel 90 events within AutoCrit. So please do so. It's great. They are on Zoom, and so you can interact with us and everything. Lots and lots of fun. Anyway, I will see you all around. Thank you very much. You have a great day.